Hi and welcome to this week's episode of the Unstuck Edit. My name is Gail and I am the host and creator of the Unstuck Edit. It is boiling here today. We're having a heat wave, but as a Leo baby, I am enjoying basking in the sunshine, I cannot lie. But the world does not stop turning just because it's sunny in England. So, what am I here to talk about today? So the theme for me is clarity before action, and this week I wanted to start talking to you all about the inner critic. Some people might call it mind monkeys, some people might not even identify it a bit as an inner critic. So sometimes maybe like it's a narrative that goes on in our brain. My inner critic is called Chip. And why is he called Chip? So when in the work that I've done on recognising my inner critic, initially I would have said that the voice sounded very feminine, almost like that sort of nagging maternal voice. However, when I started digging in and doing some work on this, I realised that because it sounded, I thought, maternal, but I realised it was this sort of patriarchy, this sort of patriarchal dominance that is permeated into a lot of women's voices over the years. And so Chip is called Chip because it's kind of the patriarchy, you know, who wants to keep us playing small, right? And Chip because C-H-I and P are letters from patriarchy and it's easy to remember. So today I thought I would obviously talk a little bit about the inner critic, but really fundamentally to help you recognise what might be actually your inner critic. You know, sometimes we think it's our voice, but maybe it's actually not your voice. And then to once we start a little bit on recognising the inner critic, and then have some tools and practices that you can use to help quieten that voice down. Now, I want to give some credit here to Tara Mohr and her book and subsequent training that I undertook on called Playing Big. And her book starts around the inner critic. And I first came across this book when I was working in financial services, and I was in the women's networking group thing that the company had set up, and they were doing a book group, and you could pick which book you wanted to do, and they gifted you the book, which was amazing. And I can't remember what the others were, to be honest, but as soon as I saw this title, Playing Big, I thought, this is curious, because I knew deep down inside of me that was not something that I was doing at that point in time. I was not playing big and living the life that I wanted. I didn't think I was really in alignment with my purpose. As much as I met so many beautiful, wonderful people in financial services and acquired a lot of very useful, good technical competencies that have helped me across my business. Ultimately, the work that I was doing in financial services did not feel that was my calling. And don't get me wrong, I witnessed so many people who that was their calling. And I mean, on one hand, it's been really helpful to, you know, you sort of think to champion a customer, to bring products that can really help people. The last piece that I sort of dabble in and out of is actually a piece of regulation that is actually really in alignment with my values around integrity and honesty, and making sure that people who are looking after your money are competent, capable, that they're fit to do their job, and that, you know, hierarchies are clear, roles and responsibilities are clear, that people can't shirk. There's no, I call it that kind of stare at your shoes syndrome when, you know, if you're in a board meeting. And anyway, that's a digression on the senior manager and certification regime. But over the years, I have done things that I feel have been valuable and have been in alignment with values that I have, but I didn't feel that working in finance was my purpose. And when I look at the people who really thrive in that environment, and it's like any career, isn't it? If you're trying to mimic someone else's success story and don't actually spend time figuring out what your success looks like for you, you're never going to get to the same heights as that person who it's come from their heart and their values and their purpose. Anyway, I am also very grateful because it introduced me to Tara's book, Playing Big. So got the book, first chapter about inner critic, and I was like, oh my good God, I feel very, very seen. And I recognised that things needed to change perhaps. And actually what recognising the inner critic and doing some of the work that I'll come on and share in a second, it actually helps you move through and figure out where you want to go, to be able to distinguish between your voice and then your inner critic's voice is so valuable to help you take the right steps towards the thing that you want to achieve. So Tara Mohr, so we did our little book group thing, brilliant, loved it. And then I loved it so much that I signed up to do her facilitator training. And so I am accredited, I don't know what the correct terminology is, but it's an accreditation I have. So whenever I work with anybody on a one-to-one basis and in things like this as well, the tools that Tara Mohr teaches to help people play big are integrated into my coaching approach. And I deliberately chose the facility because you can actually sign up and just do Tara Mohr's, her own facilitated Playing Big course, which is just you as a participant to figure out your own life. But I wanted to take it one stage further. So as a facilitator training, you do the course as a participant as well. And then you're also taught how to integrate it, how to bring these tools and concepts to people and integrate it into whatever it is that you are doing in your life. So that all being said, let's get into ways to recognise your inner critic. So there's quite a lot of ways that this might show up, or your inner critic might show up. Some of them may apply, all of them may apply. And if none of them apply, maybe you don't even have an inner critic, and fair play to you, fair play. Okay, so first one, repetitive and unhelpful thoughts. So this is where, to identify your inner critic, first of all, you're being asked to tune into the narrative that's going on and what is being said. And you might be sitting here ignoring that and thinking that it is you and not tuning in because for whatever reason, maybe it feels too painful. Maybe you just think that it's just who you are. So we're going to tune in first of all. We're going to be brave and tune into what is being said. And if you're hearing the same things on repeat that are unhelpful, then that is a sign that it's your inner critic's voice or your mind monkeys are going mental. So what might those things look like? So that could be as simple as, so one of the things I integrate this in is my styling work. So an unhelpful thought could be, oh, I'm so fat, or your stomach is massive, Gail. Why are you wearing that? Who do you think you are? And it might be, why are you wearing that thing? Why are you wearing that? Are you wearing that? You know, that kind of unhelpful thoughts could also be things like you're not strong enough for this, or you're not qualified for this, or you need to go and do this before that. You might be so that, like, even unhelpful thoughts around let's think about a work context. Maybe you want to push for a new job or get a promotion. It could be like the qualification, you don't have enough experience, and it might not even be the negative around you don't have. It could be I need more experience. I need more qualifications. So rather than it sounding that you don't have something, it could be showing up in the language. So what else might it be? Your inner critic could be saying something mean about you and then shames you for having that mean thought. So going back to the I'm so fat, or you're so fat, Gail, why are you wearing that? Your stomach is massive. But then it might be like the shaming me for having that thought would be, you should be grateful that you're here, or be grateful that you're not such and such, or, you know, so think about how this might show up for you. I touched on this one slightly in the repetitive unhelpful thoughts, but it could be the voice of you're not ready yet. So you need more qualifications, you need more experience, you need to do this, you need this other thing, or you might need to look a certain way, you might need to be fitter, drop certain weight, you know, whatever it is. It's like this sense of where you're at just now, you are not ready for the thing that it is that you want. The inner critic could also be showing up as the voice of reason. And often we think we're taught to listen to the voice of reason, but actually that voice of reason could be this sneaky inner critic holding you back, keeping you playing small, and it comes from a place of wanting you to feel safe. And so the voice of reason is that one that will often maybe keep you wanting to be safe rather than push yourself. I'll give you a really good tangible example of this. So I've worked in financial services off and on since I left uni, and back in 2013 I left properly when I opened my boutique, and since my boutique closed in 2018, and then I've been back doing some contracting work in financial services, the relationship's better because when it's contracting I feel more in control, and I haven't done it for over a year because I am playing big now. Anywho, when I did that in 2013, I remember telling my parents, and so it was my dad, but what happened was then my inner critic jumped on the bandwagon, and the voice of reason was, what about your pensions? What about your income? Because to my dad and my inner critic as well, like jumping ship from financial services, which was steady income, good income, it allowed me to have safety, security, you know, all things that a parent wants a child to have. And so for moving into this thing, it felt very risky for my parents. So this voice of reason, and then like literally my inner critic just jumped on this bandwagon. I managed to ignore that or stick the middle finger up. I was obviously having a nice moment of tuning into my inner mentor and rebellious teen, perhaps. So what else? Binary, either or thinking that, like, you know, this or that. You might find that, so you think you've only got two options. That could also be the voice of, you aren't good at insert whatever. It could be you aren't good at maths, you aren't good at negotiating, you aren't good at technical stuff. Like, I sometimes find this, so one of the things I do is I'm a netball coach, and really the performance side is something that really interests me. I'm a proper netball nerd, and I've had some fantastic opportunities to coach on a performance pathway, and I'm continually looking at how I can progress and develop. And sometimes the inner critic will show up in this space for me because so I might not put myself forward because I think, well, I've never coached at that particular level. So thinking like international wise, or like to be that coach, so it's like I'm making assumptions on what is necessary. And one of the things around technical stuff could be, well, I'm a level 2, but you know, I'd like to progress to be a level 3, but I don't have that yet. So then I'm doing maybe I'm not ready, or the job would require the use of particular technical apps to do analysis. I've maybe not used them before. So this voice is then in there going, well, you're not really good at that, or you don't know how to do that, or you're not ready yet, or you need to have a certain qualification before. And part of it comes up because, so I've never played elite netball. Maybe if I could go back and have my youth again, I might have had the opportunity. And so sometimes then it comes up in like, it feels like to coach in that space when I've never played in that space, like my inner critic can be quite noisy in that area and can tell me things that aren't helpful, but I know the root of it, and it can feel a bit like an imposter syndrome of, well, surely this assumption I'm making around what a performance level coach needs to be or look like or have. And that isn't necessarily true. Your inner critic could be irrational but persistent. It can be harsh, rude, and mean. I mean, if you're, I'm sure that the harsh, rude, and mean is something that people can probably relate to, because that's probably a quite an obvious sign of your inner critic showing up, is when it is using language that's like that. I think for me, when you start doing this work, you start to realise the sneakier ways that your inner critic is showing up. And what you didn't realise is actually your inner critic speaking. Your inner critic can play automatically. And this can come from, because it might be your inner critic is from some conditioning, that might be a limiting belief that you absorbed as a child before your critical and analytical skills were able to question it. And so therefore you might have these conditioning limiting beliefs that are on play. They're on play automatically, and you're just not even realizing that they're doing it. You might find that the taking inspiration from critical people in your life can also be your inner critic showing up. And that the example I used around my dad worried about my pension. Not that he's a critical person in my life, but you can, when you start to do this work, you start to witness the inner critic showing up in others as well. And then finally, one of the things that really I started about this conversation with is the voice of body perfectionism. The inner critic is seeking perfectionism, but we're human, right? So what can you do to quieten this voice? So the first thing, identify the inner critic as a voice, label it, and notice it. So I said at the beginning, my inner critic is called Chip. And because I did this work, I was able to label it, and I notice when Chip is talking. And I label it as such, because it creates a distinction from me and my inner critic. Like, we are not the same. And when you can separate the I from your inner critic, that's going to help quieten that voice. And when you create a character, it will personify your inner critic and help you with this separation. When I was doing the training on this, I mean, it's fascinating to hear what people's inner critic sounds like, how they personify it. It can often sound like, if you sit here, as an adult, sometimes we find that our inner critic can sound like someone from our childhood. So influential figures like teachers, maybe the bully in the playground, or your parents or guardians, or influential figures in your family. So sometimes it can feel like it's advice from an ancestor or advice from a teacher, but actually it's maybe not, and it's been amplified and shifted into something else. So the more you can do this bit around identifying the inner critic as a voice, it will help you distinguish, and that will then enable you to move forward into ground into new practices. So what might that be? So first of all, start to compassionately see your inner critic and ask, what does my safety instinct not like about this situation? So if we think our inner critic is there, or our ego is there all to try and keep us safe, and then the safety zone is the smaller zone. Sometimes, not sometimes, but you'll find that playing big will happen when we take some more risks, or we step outside of that safety container. So like for me, that question would be, what does Chip not like about this situation? So once you've been able to personify your inner critic, it becomes easier to ask that question. And because you've personified, you've started to distinguish between what is you and what is not you, and that allows you to just drill into your inner critic's motives. And that's not coming from a place of criticism, it's coming from a place of curiosity and compassion. So you're starting to look at, because that's going to give you clues as well as to maybe where you're feeling that safety instinct is kicking in, and that will also allow you to create tools or take action to help you move beyond. You can look for the humor in what they're saying, or what your inner critic is saying. I mean, sometimes Chips tells me things that I'm just like, you are an absolute dickhead. And so the more I can sort of talk about it in that and see a bit of humour, or like, you know, I think sometimes you're like, well, that is a laughable suggestion. Ha ha ha. One of the other things you can do is check in with your inner mentor or inner cheerleader. Maybe I'll do another video on actually the next step around engaging with your inner mentor. And you can also look to a core value to lead you instead. So for example, when I was saying about one of the things I've been working on in the last few years in finance is around this piece of regulation, because it aligns with my value of integrity. So I could say, well, in a particular situation, how would I respond if integrity was leading the way to make this decision and not Chip? Or what would the perspective of integrity bring into this? If you have gone on to my Substack, you'll see that I'm an advocate of Danielle Laporte's desire map, where you can get your core desired feelings, but there also you could take them as values, or think about like what's your inner compass, or your North Star, and like that. Those are good tools to ask yourself. It gives you a different perspective and allows you to tune into a different vibration and a different frequency, because you're going to be looking more from what you want rather than what's necessarily keeping you safe. Some people might tune into like your higher self, your higher purpose. Some people might call it spirit team. You can tune into whatever you want, but you're looking to engage with a more for you energy rather than the energy of playing safe. So there are also some somatic tools, so that is about coming back into your body. So there are things you can do where it's you want to remove your inner critic from the scene. So I did this when I was coaching under 15, under 17 netball last year, and I was finding that when you dig into particularly like performance athletes, your mind monkeys or your inner critic can come into play at the start of a game, or it can come into play when you make an error, something goes wrong. So actually the inner critic and our mentor tools are really helpful for performance athletes to know themselves better and to have tools that they can use to get themselves out of a particular mindset, because obviously you're not in their head, you don't necessarily know what's going on, but the more you get to know your athletes, the more you understand when situations trigger your inner critic being more noisy. One of the things that I did with them, we did a little bit of work on this in a slightly, I've created an exercise in a training session one night. It was really insightful for me as a coach to hear what the thought processes were going through these kids' heads. And one of the things we talked about at the start of games after that was we all sent our inner critic, in fact, what did we call it? Inner mean girl, that's what it was. The inner mean girl went for a coffee. They all went together. Everybody's inner mean girl left for a coffee. And so for the duration of the game, they weren't around to talk to them. And instead, what they could hear was their inner cheerleader. That's the one that's going, don't worry, you can get this. Or, oh, you've missed that goal. It's fine. We can get this. Go for your rebounds. Next one. Shake it off. Keep going. That kind of positive voice. And actually, I think they really found it helpful. And actually, when I left, I recorded a TikTok. Honestly, it was oh, it was such a privilege to watch some of these girls grow. As I'd seen them worked with some of them since they were like sort of 14, 15 up until 17, and see them transform into young women. And I remember one of the girls texted me and was like, I've seen your TikTok, which also then reminded me that on social media everybody's watching. And she messaged and she said, you know, some of the what you've taught me, like, 'cause we also did some stuff on breath work to regulate the nervous system, and she was like, I've used that in my non-netballing world. And I thought that just made my day, because I thought these tools are going to equip these young women for the rest of their lives, not just on a netball court. Right, oh, shivers. I'll get upset again because I do miss them, although I am still coaching, just I'm in a different place now. You can pantomime putting all your inner critic thoughts into a vessel, so you can visualise just taking all those thoughts, putting them somewhere and leaving them there. You can picture, if it's a voice, some people find more imagining the voice like receding, getting quieter and quieter and quieter, or going off into space. You can also just imagine like a volume button, so you've got your inner critic and you're like, volume down. And so like you imagine that real turning the dial, or, you know, what do we do? We don't dial now, do we? On your phone, you're sliding your volume down, and you might want to then slide the volume up on your inner mentor. Yeah. And then finally, maybe just a little bit around, sometimes we're like, oh, you might be sitting here going, but Gail, all I'm doing is like, this is just me being realistic. And so how to know if you're hearing your inner critic or whether you're just realistic thinking. So your inner critic will make definite pronouncements. Realistic thinking is curious questions. Your inner critic will be either or, that binary. Whereas your realistic thinking, if you're in that space, is able to see nuance. Inner critic would be yes, no questions. So in the response to, is this possible? Now, there is a slight asterisk here because I am a human design practitioner as well. And for some people, for some occasions, yes, no questions is actually the way to move through. But you have to know that you're a generator or a management, and understand that tuning into your gut, and you'll understand when it's your gut and not your inner critic. Realistic thinking instead would be open-ended questions. So how might this be possible? What part is possible? So those are questions to ask yourself. Inner critic can be repetitive, whereas realistic thinking is more forward moving. Your inner critic, if it is speaking, focuses on problems and lack, whereas if you are in a realistic thinking mindset, it will be seeking solutions. Your inner critic may be speaking in anxious tones, whereas realistic thinking, the voice coming through would be more calm. The inner critic is much more likely to be speaking from a stance of self-criticism, whereas realistic thinking will speak from a stance of self-support. So I hope those have been helpful for you. I would absolutely love to hear in the comments how this has resonated. I would even more love to know how have you personalised your inner critic? What's their name? What have you done with them? Has it really helped you even just to tune into the voice versus, you know, so to personify and start to distinguish between what is your inner critic trying to keep you safe and what is actually you and what you want. So, this is our last edit for May in our clarity before action. So just a quick recap, we've been getting clear on what is your inner mentor talking and what you can do to quieten that voice. Thank you for being here. If this has resonated, please share it. I'd love more people to learn about inner critic and how they can quieten that voice, because it really will help you move forward into playing big and whatever playing big looks like for you. So until the next episode, I hope it is warm and sunny wherever you are, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you. Bye.